Welcome back, everybody, and this is going to be exercise 8 in your Rhino Training Manual Level 1, and this exercise does require an auxiliary model, and that model is called delete. So go ahead and get that model open in Rhino and we can get started. So the first thing that I'm going to discuss are basic multi-selections. In this instance, I want to select the circle and the square, and I can select both of them by holding down the Shift key on my keyboard. And on that note, that also means I can, make as many additions to that selection as I like. On the flip side of that, if I want to deselect objects, or if I've, accidentally made a selection, I can deselect objects from the selection by holding down the Control key on the keyboard and then clicking on the objects that I intend to deselect. So now I'm back to just the circle and the square, and now I'm going to delete them. And there are 3 ways to go about doing this, 3 possible ways to delete objects. The first of which is to just type in the command bar to type in delete, right? The second way is to go to your main menu bar and click on edit, and then scroll down and select delete from here. And the final way is to just hit delete on your keyboard. There we go. Now we're going to select objects for deletion. And in this case, we're going to pay special attention to the selection menu that we're going to be getting here. And this will make sense in a second. Okay, so from the top viewport, go ahead and, tune in into the hexagon. And notice, obviously, from top view, there is 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 hexagons currently, but in top view, it only appears to be 1 hexagon. So when I click on the hexagon in top viewport, this is where the selection menu pops up. And at first, it might be kind of instinctive to want to disregard this selection menu, but it's really important that you don't, because it's basically Rhino trying to figure out which curve you intend to select. And notice that as I hover over the selections in the selection menu pop-up box, the selections actively change in the perspective viewport as well. In this case, I want to select the very top curve, so I'm going to go ahead and click with the left mouse button on that one, and I'm going to delete it from the model. Alright, next I'm going to discuss crossing boxes to make selections within Rhino. So again, in the top viewport, I'm going to use a crossing box to select the surface and the polyline, in the top right part of the drawing. So keep in mind that a crossing box is used when selecting in an open area and then dragging the window, this is important, from right to left. From right to left. And notice that both objects are now selected. So from the edit menu, you can select delete, or again, there's 3 different ways to go about it. In this case, I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard. Now I'm going to practice the crossing box to make a selection one more time. Again, in the top viewport, I'm going to make a window to select the polyline and the cylinder in the lower right part of the drawing. Like so. And notice that only those objects that are completely inside the window selection that you just made are selected. Now, we want to deselect the cylinder from this selection. So to do so, hold down the Control key on your keyboard and click on the object with the left mouse button. And that removes the selection from your current selections. Now I would like for you to delete it. And go ahead and continue practicing deleting just a few more objects within Rhino. Again, remember you can hold down Shift on your keyboard to select multiple objects. Delete. And also keep in mind that you have the option to undo and redo at any given point within, while you're working within Rhino. So let's say I want to undo the last thing I did, then that's Ctrl Z. Those are the shortcut keys for undo. If you need to redo, that's also an option, and the shortcut keys for redo are Ctrl Y. So I'm going to undo one more time to bring up the last items that I deleted, so I'm back to what you see here. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about dedicated selection commands. In addition to the selection options we just practiced, there are several other useful tools for selecting objects. In the next exercise, we will use some of these tools. So to access these tools from the Select toolbar, we're going to go to the Tools menu up here, and then we're going to click Toolbar Layout. And then under Files, make sure it says Default, and it should say that by default. And then go ahead and scroll down under the toolbars and activate the toolbar called Select. And then hit OK. And then you'll see your toolbar pop up somewhere on your Rhino interface. It might not look exactly like mine, so keep that in mind. You might have to modify it slightly, and also keep in mind that you can either dock this toolbar or you can leave it as a floating toolbar like I have decided to here. Alright, so let's go through a few of the tools within this Select toolbar. First, let's start off by clicking Curves right here. It's called Select Curves. And notice when you do so, all the curves that are within your Rhino model are selected. Next, we're going to click Invert. And when you do so, notice that the invert was selected from the previous selection. The curves have been deselected and the solids have been selected. Next, we're going to click None, which basically deselects any active selections within Rhino. Next, we're going to click Polylines, and this one is a little tricky because it's embedded within the Select Curves tool. If you click on the little drop-down menu, and you'll notice that it's right here, the fifth tool across to the right. And notice that all the polylines have been selected. Okay, now we're going to click on Surfaces. And I currently don't have any surfaces on my screen, so nothing was added to the selection. Now I'm going to go to Poly Surfaces. And I have two poly surfaces in my Rhino model. I have a rectangular prism and a cylinder, and they have been added now to the selection. One more time, I'm going to click None to basically deselect everything. And now, in my top viewport, I'm going to draw a few lines. And a few curves. Okay. And you'll see them automatically display in all other viewports as well. And now, one of the interesting tools I wanted to show you is the Last Created Objects tool, which is this one here. And you'll notice that the very last curve that I drew is what was selected within the Rhino model. Alright, so go ahead and either click None or hit Escape on your keyboard to exit from any selections you might have active. And now I'm going to discuss filter selections. A filter restricts any selection mode to specified object types. Object types that can be restricted are, for example, annotations, blocks, control points, curves, lights, meshes, point clouds, points, polysurfaces, surfaces, hatches, and also others. Okay, so from the status bar, remember the status bar is located down here, very bottom of your Rhino interface. From the status bar, I want you to click on Filter, and then you'll see your selection filter pop-up box. Right-click Curves, and all other selection options will uncheck. Now, in the perspective viewport, I want you to use the crossing box to select the entire drawing. And notice something interesting happens. Regardless of whether or not all the objects were enclosed within the selection, because of my selection filter, only the curves were selected in this instance. So go ahead and hit escape on your keyboard to deselect. Now I want you to right-click Surfaces. And all other selection options, again, are going to be unchecked. And if you still have that surface on the ground, if you didn't delete it, then you can make a window selection, and that's the only thing that will be selected. In my case, this was deleted during the delete exercise part of the exercise, so nothing will appear when I make my window selection. However, if I right-click on polysurfaces, if I were to make a window selection, then the two polysurfaces that I do have within my Rhino model would be selected. Alright, so we're almost done. Go ahead and hit escape to remove any active selections you have, and then go ahead and reset your selection filter so that all filters are back on. And you can close this selection toolbar now as well. And that concludes exercise 8.